welcome everyone to this evening's session. It's there's been a lot of interest, and it's great to see so many of you here live. And I think, as Deb said, we are recording this as well, so hopefully others can benefit in future as well. So it's fantastic to be here. I'm Amanda Bogue. I'm the chair for this evening, and have a really strong interest in leadership. I've had various leadership roles within the profession. It was Royal College president including being Royal College president a few years ago, and currently I'm the chief medical officer of IVC Evidensia. So I'm really delighted to be here hosting this session, and looking forward to hearing the thoughts of our panelists, but also the questions that you guys will bring. So just very briefly introduce our panelists. I'm just going to ask them all to say maybe just one or two sentences about their current role. We're then going to invite Rick, who's done some of the work with the college on this project, to share some insights with us, and then come back to the panelists for a discussion, aiming to finish up around 8:15. So just to introduce our panelists then, and as I said, once I say your name, if you could maybe just say hello to everyone that's here, and a little bit, just a short sentence about who you are. So I think Ryan Davis, you're first up.
Hi there, I'm Ryan Davis. I'm lucky enough to be SPIV's president in its 90th year this year, and my real world role is a surgical peripatetic vet, but I also do surgical mentoring in practice as well.
Thanks, Ryan. Emmanuel Oloyede, you're next up, I think, please. Just need to unmute yourself. Struggling to do that.
It might be he needs help to be unmuted, because I found the same thing. Yes, okay. That's what Manuel said.
Yes, that was the problem. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Lovely to meet you.
There.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, hello, everybody. Lovely to meet you. My name is Emmanuel, and I'm currently a fourth-year student at the Royal Veterinary College studying veterinary medicine, and I'm currently the president of Animal Aspirations. And so for those of you who may not have heard of Animal Aspirations, we're a student-led organization, and our main aim is to increase and encourage ethnic diversity within veterinary medicine and other animal-related careers as well. So yeah, lovely to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks, Emmanuel. Anna Judson's next up. I don't know if she made it. I know she was struggling to get in. Sophie, Deb, has Anna made it yet?
No, not just yet. We're just trying to get her in now.
Okay, fine. And Garad then, say hi. Fourth member of our panel.
Hi everyone, I'm Ing Herod, and I'm Director for Advancement of the Professions here at the Royal College. We are the team that looks after the non-regulatory, non-statutory side of the organisation. So topics such as leadership, diversity and inclusion, mental health, and a host of others are the key areas that my team look after.
Great, thanks. Sheldon Middleton next, the fourth member of our panel. Hi Sheldon. You might need unmuting as well. There we go.
Hear me now. Perfect. Sorry, technical issues. I'm Sheldon Middleton. I'm CEO of Garden Vets at Keele, which is the new teaching hospital at the Harper Keele Vet School, where we're trying to beg, borrow and steal from a variety of other professions who do it better than us in a variety of ways. And I'm also the Senior Vice President of BSAVA, so I was President last year.
Great, thanks Sheldon. And I see Anna's here as well, fantastic. Glad you're able to get in, Anna, so great to have you here. So last but not least, Anna, do you just want to give us just a couple of sentences on who you are as the last member of our panel for this evening?
Yeah, hello, thanks for inviting me for this panel. Apologies for turning up late. I'm Anna Judson. I'm Junior Vice President of the British Veterinary Association. I'm a first opinion vet and former practice owner, initially in a mixed, then latterly a small animal only practice. And I'm a past president of SPIVs.
Great, thanks, Anna. So we've got a fantastic panel there with a real range and diversity of experiences, which will be just what we need when we're talking about leadership, I think. So moving on, as I said, we're just going to have a short introduction before we go to the panel from Rick Harris, who's the founder of Customer Faithful, which is a research consultancy. And some of you may have met Rick during a series of insight sessions that took place ahead of the RCVS Workforce Summit in 2021. So before we get into that discussion piece, I'm just going to ask Rick to say a few words about how the Voice of the Professions fed into the Workforce Summit and the subsequent action plan that this is part of. So over to you, Rick.
Lovely, thank you. And hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. I'm the only person, I think, sharing slides tonight, so that's good news. And I've got very few of them. That's even better news. So let me just share those. So I know we're here to talk about the first of the ambitions, leaders at all levels. But I've been asked to just say a few words about where this all started, which was a little while ago now. So from a research point of view, the good news is that it really is anchored in the voice of the profession. Before we even did the Workforce Summit, we ran a whole series, we invited the profession really to come along to some focus groups and interviews, thinking we'd do a few. And we got over 500 people offering to take part, which I can tell you, having done research for 20 odd years, is pretty extraordinary. We didn't have time or budget to speak to all of them. So we spoke to about 10% of those, about 50 odd people, from corporate, from independent, full-time, part-time, a very wide cross-section of profession life. And we actually managed to run a survey for about 135 others. So we did get a lot of voices early on, and that feedback was completely confidential. One of the reasons I was involved is it's entirely independently run. And the feedback was, it was positioned to try to tease out some of the pain points that were being experienced, but also to explore that in a positive way. So that's where it started. It was UK wide, so we did run them remotely. It was kind of COVID time. And that was the feed into the Workforce Summit, which was at the end of 2021. So we did have some voices, hundreds of comments, I mean, a whole database full of them, bringing in the themes, the 6 themes as they were at the time, of what people were talking about, to share those, to give people a chance to discuss them with their peers. I think we had about 80 different people in the at the summit. And we used a design thinking approach. I've presented this a few times within the college, run some sessions on that. But if you're not familiar with design thinking, it starts with the what's it like on the front line, and it builds through, let's define the problems in a positive way. So how might we improve this? How might we change that? And that has really influenced the ambitions, that the first one that you'll work on tonight, and the others as well. So that was the next step, to widen representation. A lot of different stakeholders there, from education and so on. And then the third step really has been what has happened since, a development plan, the action plan, which has gone on for months. Perhaps we didn't envisage that it was going to take as long as that, but the number of stakeholders that the college has, it actually doesn't surprise me that much, to engage with those, to collaborate with those, and to integrate with many of the programs and initiatives that I know have been going on anyway before even the Insight session started. And it was encouraging, I think, for the college, how many of those programs were mentioned in the focus groups and interviews. So it was quite a bit of awareness. So we came out of all of those focus groups with 6 themes. And there they are, running from kind of life stage in many ways. So readiness for work was really about those starting off in the profession, being able to come in from training, and perhaps the gap between training and everyday life in the profession, through to the pressures of work-life balance. You know more about that than I do, but of course the caseloads, the vacancies, the shift to part-time, and so many other mini themes within that. The groups really did distinguish between work-life balance and workplace culture, and the difference being not just the pressures of the work-life balance, but what we as the profession have kind of come to accept as tolerable, as acceptable, as normal, which includes the stress and the working through lunch breaks and accommodating, perhaps not accommodating as well as we might like, those who've got family responsibilities, care responsibilities, those with disabilities. It's quite an unforgiving profession, was what the groups told us. Through into client interactions, which really is speaking to, I think, as much to UK society as much as vet society. In other words, the expectations of clients when they come through the door are built in many other walks of life, and you're seeing part of that. But I think in COVID, they brought 3 million extra pets with them, so I can kind of see where some of those pressures lie. Through to career development, and so much talk about that in the sessions. I could spend a whole day talking about that, but I don't have the time tonight. and return to work. And that was particularly focused around maternity, paternity, but other aspects as well. Perhaps people who've taken a career break, perhaps people who are have left the profession altogether and decided to come back, and persuaded to come back, particularly with the vacancies they have around. So it was quite hard work to boil those down into 6 themes, because just me talking for a minute or two there, you've probably heard lots of mini themes that were mentioned. So those were the 6 themes that went into the summit and were discussed at summit and taken out by the college to work on. And from those, we get to where we've got to now, which is those 6 themes on the left, and on the right, you can see, well, actually 6 more themes, of 6 ambitions rather. And I did at one point try to show arrows which showed readiness to work has become this, that, and the other. But actually, that's not really what the college has done. They have, as I put on the slide there, they've kind of blended them and integrated them, because they don't live in splendid isolation. They link together so much, and therefore I think the ambition was just trying to put a bit more focus around it and to bring them together and to build them into an overall program, rather than we'll tackle theme 1, ambition 2, and so on. But as you probably know, there are actually 7 ambitions and not 6. So what's the missing one? Well, the missing one is, as you've probably guessed by now, the one that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is to shape leaders at all levels, the importance of leadership. And I think if those insights taught me anything about leadership, it's that it's not new to the college by any means. You know, people spoke about Mind Matters and showing leadership in that. They talked about Vivet and the innovation programs, the practice standard schemes. These are things I hadn't heard of until I was in those groups. But they were saying, you know, these do demonstrate leadership from the college and some of their partners as well, at initiative levels. If you're part of that program, then you get the benefit of that. But I think what this ambition is trying to set is, how do you move that into the culture, which links to another ambition there, of course, as well, and to kind of imbue it into across the whole profession, and empower people at all levels. And that is truly ambitious, because I think that's difficult. But I can assure you from the insight that we heard that there's an appetite for it. And so I hope that tonight will be the start of taking that forward, and I wish everyone luck with it tonight.
Thanks, Rick. That's really, really great. Thank you for that insight into all the work that's gone to getting us here. And I think all of us would, I think whether we're in the profession or not, will recognise when we're in an environment where we have good leadership and we feel that, compared to an environment where it just doesn't feel right. And often that comes down to this very subjective topic of leadership. But I think leadership at all levels is you're right, so crucial. So at that point, it will be great to bring our panel in to discuss what that means, leaders at all levels within our profession, and what we can do to foster that. Both the college, I know, as you mentioned, they have a number of programs, including we did the Edward Jenner leadership program a few years ago which I was involved with. But there's a lot of different leadership activity across the profession. But what and how can we do that better to ensure we foster leaders at all levels, so everyone can feel comfortable and happy in their workplace, instead of feeding into the culture. So I think to get things going, what we've asked the panel to do is just provide kind of maybe just roughly about 5 minutes each of their thoughts on this topic, which will give them all a chance to speak. And we've also got some questions that have been sent in ahead of time. And of course, I really hope that you guys listening tonight will also post questions in the chat box that I can then ask to the panel on your behalf. I think I'd also encourage the panelists to ask each other questions once you've had your kind of 5 minutes, because I think these things do work best very often when they are at conversation. And ideally, you won't hear anything from me at all for the rest of the evening, and you guys will just be able to talk it all through. But we've got plenty of prompts. And as I said, would really love to hear the thoughts of those listening as well, if there's particular areas they want to follow up on. So on that note, I'll go around the 5 of you first in turn, just to give you a chance to share your thinking, and then we'll have a more flowing discussion following on from that. So do the same as before. So Ryan, do you want to go first up?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is a topic that I'm very fond of and interested in, really, because I came into a leadership role fairly early on in my career. And I think the one learning that I think I can really wholeheartedly say I've made is to fail well. And what do I mean by that? I think most of our decisions are 50-50, and we place a lot of emphasis on making the right ones, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and we sort of think of the other decision as being the counterfactual, as being perfection, and we compare ourselves to what if we get it wrong, and compare ourselves to this fictional situation. But decisions literally are 50-50, and some are going to go our way, some of them aren't. And I think we talk about self-care within the profession, and I think getting away from comparing yourself to perfection all the time is something that I've learned. And I feel that I've made a lot of mistakes as a leader, and I think sitting here where I am now, if I could go back to myself at the start, I'd have a lot of life lessons, really. And there's always things that punctuate what you do and little anecdotes that you pick up. And one that I thought was really poignant for me was the Daniel Kahneman book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he's this professor of psychology, and he was asked to help the Israeli army with leadership. And he was talking to Air Force pilots, and specifically some of the high-ranking officials. And one of them was saying, my brigade is really good because when we have a plane crash, I give them a massive telling off, and they know never to crash a plane again. And this Daniel Kahneman just quite simply put to him, how many people that you don't tell off crash a plane twice? And I thought it was brilliant, because you do learn from your mistakes. You don't need to necessarily beat yourself up over them. It's a natural evolution, and nobody knows how to be a leader from day one. We all have to go through the process of growing and building on that. And I think it's understanding that leadership versus management thing. And I think being part of SPIVS, I've been part of SPIVS for 6-7 years now, but it was when I got to be involved with SPIVS, it was there I kind of really picked up on the difference between leadership and management. And I think leadership is something that we can all take responsibility for in our jobs. And I think if we do take leadership into our everyday roles, everybody at every level of the business can help to improve things just a little bit, very regularly, if not every day, so it's very different to management, where it's this sort of ethereal thing where the responsibility is passed on to someone else, whereas leadership, you take that responsibility for yourself, really. And I think if we're not careful, if we don't change things, if we are overly critical ourselves, we get to this analysis paralysis stage where you see a lot of practices where you have team members who just feel trapped, and they're not happy with how it is, but they don't know how to make it better. And that, I know we come on to culture in the next panel session, but I think culture is one of the most important things to get right, if not the most important thing to get right in a practice. And that comes from leadership and feeds into leadership as well. So I think for me, it's all about how you learn from your mistakes and how you allow your team to grow in that situation as well. And I think it's giving yourself time to discuss it as well. I think one of the other key points is how do you value a meeting? I think when you talk to a lot of practices, we're all time poor. There's lots of pressures on us at the minute. So meetings slip by the wayside. But if you don't talk and you don't explore the issues, then, you don't make improvements, and you're in this spiral of not fixing the problems until the culture becomes difficult, and then there's knock-on effects from there. So I think, what is the value of a meeting to your practice? And that is part of your leadership. If you place the emphasis on the importance of meetings and make them happen, then it is going to positively impact things moving forwards. So I think that would be my 5 minutes of fame.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's a fantastic start. I love that Kahneman book. I think it's a fantastic read. It's really good. So thanks for that. Thanks for getting us started there, Ryan. Emmanuel, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I think Ryan made some very good points there. And I think one point in particular that actually resonated with me was regarding the fact that we're not all kind of born leaders overnight. It's something you do really need to work at. And I think in my case, I actually realized that I was kind of leading change without a title. And although I'm currently the president of Animal Aspirations, I didn't actually set out to be a leader. Essentially, all I kind of really did was set out to make a difference. And so in order for me to make a difference, I had to kind of be a role model to the younger generation. And in kind of doing that, I had to kind of be visible and make sure that I was being a good role model that they can kind of look up to and kind of identify with. So I think from my perspective, although being a leader, sometimes you can find yourself in a situation whereby you are leading without a title, you are leading without realizing it. I do think it's something that once you have realized, it's kind of taking that responsibility and realizing what is the change that you want to make and how are you going to do those things. And for those who are kind of fortunate enough now to be in situations where they are leaders within the veterinary profession, from my perspectives, I do think that those who are veterinary leaders play an important role for leading change, particularly regarding the representation of individuals from various backgrounds. And I think the lack of diversity within the profession is a problem that needs to be addressed. And ultimately, what I do believe is that with diversity comes new interactions, new ideas, new relationships. And I think these are all things that can actually be utilized to create both a welcoming, constructive, and a progressive profession. And I think the kind of important thing here to kind of focus on is the fact that this wouldn't only benefit those from marginalized groups, but it also benefits the profession as a whole. And again, speaking from my own experience, I think for me as a student, being involved in the creation of something, being Animal Aspirations, which was desperately needed by the profession, has actually helped me appreciate the impact which I have as an individual and the impact that my presence has on the younger generation, particularly those who are aspiring towards similar career aspirations, because I think ultimately having somebody you can kind of look up to and identify with really does make it that much easier to work towards your career aspirations. And so I do think being a leader is sometimes very much realizing that you are leading without change and without a title. In other cases, realizing that you are a leader, accepting that and kind of addressing the fact that you do have a responsibility to kind of uphold and maintain and how you're going to go about doing that. And I think a lot of it comes from having conversations with people. One thing that I found in my role is that if you're having conversations with various different stakeholders, I'm able to better understand ways in which I can move the organization forwards, and in turn it then goes on to benefit our target audience. And so a lot of leadership roles, I think, involves accepting a responsibility, as Ryan mentioned, but then also having a lot of conversations, kind of having that humility to really discuss areas which you might be struggling on, really depending on people around you, because I think ultimately to make a change, you really do need to come together as one if a meaningful change does want to be had.
Great, thanks, Emmanuel. Really, really good points there. I think you point about the difference between a formal organizational leadership roles and the kind of the leadership that comes from within when you want to make a difference, regardless of what job title you might have, is really, 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 really valuable, really important point. Listening to the diverse range of views. So no, thank you, Emmanuel. Anna, do you want to go next? Give us your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I qualified in an era where non-clinical matters barely registered as being business critical. Much of my professional volunteering has involved working with organisations and on projects seeking to dispel this view. I'm therefore delighted to have joined the BVA, which has long championed and supported Team Vet with initiatives such as the Good Veterinary Workplace Project with its accompanying resources, including a webinar series, some of you may have seen it recently. This week it featured Amy Sorum discussing how she led the way in developing her own positive practice workplace culture. So as a vet student, I heard a phrase used by my then mentor that if I do my job well, I'll become redundant in this role. What he meant was that he intended that his students would develop knowledge, leadership skills, and the self-belief to apply for his or other lead roles. A powerful message that leadership is less about self and more about supporting, providing opportunity and empowering others. There are many in the veterinary profession who wouldn't describe themselves as leaders, yet who daily demonstrate leadership skills and qualities by initiating change, taking actions to develop a positive practice culture, mentoring and coaching people, and adding value within a workplace, the profession, and across their communities through their initiatives. So I agree there with Emmanuel that many of us become leaders accidentally, not by design. We are doing things, we're taking action on things that matter to us, things we're passionate about, and then suddenly find that people are looking to us as a leader, which sometimes is a bit awkward because you don't see yourself as that. So by observing, though, and acknowledging these as the leadership actions they are, even if they haven't got a leadership title at that point, we can help others build confidence, gain further leadership skills, and empower them to take up opportunities for which they might not otherwise have considered themselves suitable. Daily, there are reports of veterinary professionals taking exceptional leadership action on matters of animal health and welfare, for vet life, colleagues, and the wider profession and community. Examples include the British Veterinary LGBTQ+, British Veterinary Ethnicity and Diversity Society, and the British Veterinary Chronic Illness Support, who have highlighted the need for the profession to become more diverse and inclusive and more flexible in its structures and thinking. Their leaders are showing us the way by creating innovative allyship and courageous conversations training for veterinary teams. And I'd urge you to come and join the session on this at BVA Live in May and hear from those who have implemented positive inclusivity change in practice as a result. Another example is Ellie West, veterinary anaesthetist, and Laura Hyam, who created Vet Sustain. They were the first to challenge us to adopt sustainable working practices. They set the ball rolling for the expansion of green groups, investors in the environment accreditation, and sustainability plans in veterinary workplaces, inspirational leadership, creating a cascade leadership effect, resulting in extensive workplace sustainability action. And many of those green groups are run by people from all sections of the veterinary profession. It's not just the leaders that are doing these, it's being driven by literally everybody. So that's another aspect of inclusivity, is that everybody's been given a chance to rise and contribute in that area. So what are the barriers to offering more widespread leadership training? Cost and time will always be cited as a factor, but reframing our thinking from what will it cost us to offer leadership training to what will it cost us by not offering leadership training can be useful in this context. How many people's talent remains hidden? How many feel restricted in job or career scope when leadership training might reignite passion for veterinary work and staving someone leaving the profession? The biggest barrier is probably mindset, and that's something we can all change if we choose. So if there is leadership potential within us all, then leadership training and a work environment that is safe, truly inclusive, and which seeks to support and develop the veterinary team should be available to all. And I have to mention again that BVA's Good Veterinary Workplace definitely provides a compelling framework to that end. And I'm really looking forward to hearing all the questions from the audience and the panelists' answers, because unless we listen to everybody, we can't move the profession forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. That's great. And I think, again, that common theme emerging of people being leaders, even though they may not identify them initially as being a leader or be in a sort of a formal role, and the importance of that and how you get into it by accident very often rather than formally. But no, thanks, Anna. And Garad, do you want to give us your perspective?
Yes, thank you, and thank you everyone so far for sharing your stories with us. It's been really interesting to sort of hear how the different styles of leadership have resonated with you, and where you think this conversation is going to go this evening. I think I'm very curious about people's definition of leadership, and we talked about whether we should provide a formal definition of leadership for our delegates here this evening, and whether that would be a good anchoring point, or whether it might actually constrain thought. And one of the things that came from that discussion is the fact that leadership means so many different things to different people, depending on both your lived experience in your personal life, your professional life, while you're still training, right the way through to where you are on any one given day, and what might be happening around you, what might be happening to you. Sometimes leadership happens to you, sometimes you have to be the one who is leading, and then there's the spectrum in between of where people feel comfortable, and ultimately whether they take on a formal role of leadership, or whether that's more everyday leadership. And everyday leadership is something that I'm quite passionate about. It's something that I feel we can all pick things up on, and we can all develop our confidence and our skills in trialing in those different areas. I've come to this role and into the world of veterinary from a slightly different route to the rest of you. My undergraduate is in medical science, and my focus area was on paediatrics. My first experience of real leadership and seeing that in action was in resus in the paediatric resus in the Children's Hospital, and it was quite an incredible moment to be part of. It wasn't the best outcome, but it was a true demonstration of how clinical leadership of everybody within that team who was in that room, from the consultants right the way down to those who were the domestic staff who were clearing up after this event, how they delivered that sort of, okay, what does this mean to us? What does this tell us? Where do we go next with this? And very much focusing on not having a blame culture, and looking at what we could learn and what could go forward, and being part of that, and not really understanding why it was a special moment, of why there was this understanding and this human level of empathy that was driven through everybody. And I went on to do some training after that, and sort of realized all the theory that sat behind this, and what that had enabled this team to do. And it made me sort of go, wow, this is something that if you get it right, no matter the circumstances that people are experiencing, even those truly awful ones, leadership can cause teams to survive and to go on to thrive and to do what they are made to do. And that was sort of my shaping experience. And then, as we all do, we all end up in different roles that perhaps give us different experiences of leadership, and where you sort of question, oh, if I was in that role, would I do it that way? How would I look at things? And that's, I think, where you start to learn and grow, that when you're not in that leadership role, but you're experiencing it, you start to think, how might I? What would I do differently? What can I learn from this? Let me steal that phrase, because that's a really good one. And that's where we can have such a varied approach to leadership. And that's why I don't think that having one definition is perhaps the most helpful, that it means something different to us wherever we are, which I know is a repetition, but I do believe that that's quite key for us. I think for us as a college, it's important for me to share with you what we're doing. Leadership has been a very key work stream, and Amanda here is one of those change makers who made sure that was the case. We have a dedicated leadership and inclusion manager. We have a leadership lead who sits on council. We deliver a lot of training, and we enable a lot of CPD, all of which is free of charge, and that vets, nurses, and the rest of the practice staff can take part in. Within my team, within the advancement of the professions, we recognise that it's not just for the vets, it's not just for the nurses. We try to look at the multidisciplinary team, whether those are clinical or non-clinical, to make sure that we highlight the different roles that people play, and that CPD can be utilised. Things such as creating our leadership materials in the leadership library, and looking at some of our academy courses, so our most recent one being the leadership versus management, and what the difference is. Those different sort of multimodal, multi-channel resources that we've created there are a way to inspire learning and help people understand where their journey might go. Not everybody wants to do formal training, not everybody has the time to do formal training, but it's an opportunity to start picking up ideas and taking it back to your workplace, to your organisation, playing around with it and thinking, what could this do? We've made sure that diversity and inclusion is a very separate element to our leadership from a strategy perspective. We have our diversity and inclusion strategy that is 2 years old later this week. But actually we embed all of our inclusive principles across the work that we are doing. So things like the leadership library has an inclusive leadership section on it, because we believe it needs to be called out, and that it is something that is a very specialist skill, and is something that is integral to good leadership. We're currently developing an inclusive recruitment toolkit, so that hopefully that will help some of the recruitment and the retention issues that are being faced. As Amanda mentioned, the Edward Jenner MOOC that was started. We've had over 7,000 people go through that, which is amazing. And that has inspired us to create the more bite-sized content that we've created, because not everybody has time to do those things. The Edward Jenner is currently on hold at the moment because of what's going on within the NHS, but it's enabled us to think about where do we go. But I think the item that I really want to come back to is the fact that leadership is core to resolving the recruitment, retention and return challenges. There are so many opportunities to showcase values and to enable people to recognise those values in you, whether that's your everyday approach to things and being proud of changing things that are just not good enough, right the way through to sort of formal leadership, where we've got some of our other ambitions that will go into more detail. But leadership is for everybody, whether you're a student, first day in, whether you're on your last day before retirement. It's something that all of us can contribute to. We won't all get it right, but we can all try, and we can all try to make a difference.
Thanks, Angharad. Yes, coming back to that, we all have to practice it as well. It's like anything, any skill, you have to practice your leadership muscles. But yes, absolutely for everybody. So last but not least of our panelists to give us their perspective before we kind of have more of a conversation. Sheldon, over to you.
Thanks. It's been really fascinating listening to everyone's discussion on this so far, and it's always a bit nerve-wracking going last because you think you might not have anything to say. But one of the advantages that I've got at the moment with Garden Vets is that it's a startup, it's a new practice, which gives us the opportunity not to have any legacy drag. So we can, we're trying to think, how can we do things differently? We started again with a design thinking approach to try and design the practice. And one of those things is about leadership. So I think my perspective on this is a little bit more practical. How can I try and get leadership at all levels within a practice? And Ryan mentioned airline pilots, and one of the professions that we've kind of knowingly stolen from is the airline industry, about their reporting. And one of the fantastic things is that in a cockpit, everyone can challenge anyone in that cockpit. And that's a culture thing. That wasn't always the case. That's had to have a culture change. That has significant impacts on safety. But the reason I'm mentioning it is because you can't have leadership unless that challenge is allowed. You have the culture where anyone can challenge, so anyone can have the authority to lead. And if one of the things I would love in our practice is that I could have that culture where anyone can challenge anyone else, because if it's handled correctly, then actually it's not a challenge, it's just a learning opportunity. Either the person that is challenging learns why something's happened, or the person that is challenged learns and maybe prevents a mistake. But if you take the egos away and you've got a culture of consistent learning, then that in itself will automatically lend and precipitate leadership at all levels. And the other thing that I'm thinking about, we've had a lot of reference to leadership structures and people in leadership positions and whatever else. One of the things that I'm considering at the moment is, do we have the correct management structures in our institutions, in our businesses, in our clinics, to best support leadership at all levels? And I don't know the answer, but we've got, in most institutions and businesses, we've got a traditional hierarchical structure with a manager or CEO at the top and cascading down from that. And that's worked very well for the profession over the years. But I just wonder if it's creaking a bit, and whether we've actually got alternative structures that we could have in place. So I do like the analogy of, instead of having a captain of a ship who's steering from bridge, borrowing from nautical themes now, instead of that, if we had a flotilla of much smaller ships that were all steering in the same direction, that's much more of an analogous leadership at all levels approach, that each unit, each boat knows where they're going, but can manage their own unit individually. And I've been looking at alternative management structures within the profession. Can we have a business that has matrix hierarchy or bubbles or self-managing teams or a flat hierarchy structure, and how would those work, and how do they work in other areas, and would that allow a little bit more practical leadership at all levels? And I think also, and Garrett's mentioned that there's no one definition of leadership, so it's great you can just make it what you like. But the one that I prefer is servant leadership, which is where you're not saying, as you know, the alpha male at the top. I'm very aware that I'm male, pale, and stale here in the leadership diversity game, but you're not at the top saying this is how we do this. Follow me, follow me. It's how can I support everyone else to achieve their career goals or to achieve the best outcomes or whatever, and it's if you can distribute that amongst the business, the institution, then I think that has far better outcomes. And in terms of developing your leadership skills, I would echo what Anna was saying, that institutions and volunteering is a fantastic way to actually develop your leadership skills. Certainly my career through BSAVA, I started out in the regions and was given the tools by volunteering to actually step into leadership positions. And that was in parallel to my practice career. So I think there are ways and means out there if people do want to develop themselves, and certainly we'll be allowing volunteering within Garden Vets, because I think it's just such a fantastic opportunity for people.
Good. Great. Thanks, Sheldon. Thanks so much. That's really interesting. That's kind of the models of leadership, distributed leadership, the structural leadership models that we can have in our organisations, and how they can then impact on how people feel. I think that's super interesting area to explore. We had heard from all of our panelists now. Haven't been any questions coming on the chat. It's very, very unusual this to be in a room, albeit a virtual one, of vets and vet nurses, and not have any questions. So please do pop a question in the box if you would like to explore any of the areas that the panelists have picked up on in their initial thinking. In their initial thoughts. But what I'm going to ask now, while we wait for anything to come from you guys, is maybe, were any of the panelists, did any of you have something that sparked your interest that you heard from one of the other panelists that you'd like to explore in a bit more detail? I have some questions I can go to as well, but I thought it'd be good to get that conversation going. So Anna, yes, what would you like to?
It's only a small point, but it's picking up on what Sheldon said there about volunteering. And I view, that's volunteering not just within the veterinary profession, but absolutely outside of it. I thought at one point, when illness and caring needs meant that I was out of clinical work for a few years, I kind of thought that I'd be losing ground career-wise. And it's only now, sort of much later on, that I can see that so many of the things that I did in that time that I got involved with in the local community actually taught me so much. And I think we mustn't forget that there's an awful lot of transferable skills from the things that people do outside. They're not, our lives are not segregated into just work and family. There's a lot of merging. And I think that we must, perhaps when we're asking or looking at some of our team members, is explore a bit more deeply what people might be curious about what people are doing in their outside lives. And that you can pick up so much more and get a feel for people's capability. So if we really are going to support and develop our teams, we've got to talk with them and be curious.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I have to say, having worked in a bar before I went to vet school, many of the skills I learned diffusing situations there were immensely useful to me later on in my career. So leading conversations in that way. So I think that's a really, really good point. Very well made. Any other thoughts from the panelists that they'd like to explore with each other?
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in, Amanda. I mean, again, Sheldon's having a good night here, but I was picking up on his comments about QI effectively. I think QI is so important in clinical practice, especially forging leadership within teams. I think it gives a very positive framework to be able to have these difficult conversations, that if we are challenging each other, we can do it in the context of quality improvement. And certainly I know RCVS knowledge is key in this area, but I've also worked with Angela Rayner, and she introduced me to the framework for improving joy in work from the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, which is a fascinating way of just changing the leadership dynamics within teams in a really positive way. So I think the QI side of things is absolutely key to be taken alongside leadership moving forwards for the profession.
Yeah, and so useful across the whole spectrum of work that we do in practice.
Absolutely.
So yeah, really good points. Any other thoughts from the panelists? I've got there's one question come in from Jim Anderson about how much of being a successful leader in developing others is related to that kind of organizational leadership position and actually having control of resources, and how much of it can be done. I guess the question leading to that is how much can be done outside of those formal leadership roles where you don't necessarily have control of the kind of people or financial resources in the practice. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot that can be achieved through coaching, which is possibly a subset of leadership, and it's about encouraging people to reach their potential and to reach their goals, and that doesn't necessarily need resourcing. That can be done over coffee, or it can be done outside the surgery. And I suppose again, it depends on the structure of the business and what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to achieve through leadership. I mean, if you're going to achieve leading a second branch surgery, then yes, you are going to need some conversation about the purse strings. But if you're trying to, develop and encourage someone to apply for a senior role or whatever, then that doesn't necessarily need the resources behind it.
And I think that people can show leadership within their current roles in so many ways. So sometimes it's just giving people the space to not tell them what to do, but let them develop their own systems, give them areas of responsibility. It's that sort of an early stage of developing leadership, and see how they run with it. Say, we give you freedom to come back to us with fresh ideas. And, aren't we lucky that we've got this wonderful, hardworking group around us that all see things differently? And, the people sort of, if you like, they're in charge, are just not going to have the same vision as everybody else. So let's hear it, see what they think they could do differently. Even if it's just process management, systems management to make things quicker, easier. But let's just ask the rest of the team, and ask them to give them that freedom, that space. And sometimes you can say, well, and then acknowledge it and say, that was amazing what you did there. That change has cut so much time off, or reduced complaints, or whatever thing that you were trying to achieve. And so that's leadership. And actually make them realize, make them understand that is leadership. They may not see it in themselves, but that's where we can empower them. And none of that daily sort of compliments or sort of support, or just identifying it as leadership. That doesn't cost anything.
I think that's a really important point there, Anna, that it's about getting to know the people that you work with, and understanding whether you are the leader of that team or that organisation, or whether you're another part of it. That if you get to know people and you understand what motivates them, what are their values, that you can encourage them to explore those within the workplace or outside within volunteering or other community endeavours that they might be taking on, and that those are the skill sets that actually sometimes bring people to life. They might suddenly find something that they want to specialize in, not necessarily from a clinical skill set, but because they are suddenly really passionate about delivering sustainability changes within their organization or well-being. There's a whole wealth of different areas that people can lead in. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. It doesn't have to be a recognized sort of veterinary speciality. It can be something that can have an impact on everybody within the organization. and it's not unique to the vets and the nurses who have those formal roles within the practice. It's everybody else who contributes, even if they're only there a few hours a week. There is something that everybody can do, and I think for the recruitment challenges that many practices are facing as well, if people are encouraged to explore those different development goals that they might have, it will help people want to stay within that organisation because they feel valued. They know that their skills and that their desire to want to make change is recognised. And if they feel that way, they are more likely to want to stay with you. And that's something that money can't buy.
With those thoughts, I'd love to hear. Those topics that we've just been talking about, I'd love to hear Emmanuel's take on this, because it sounds exactly what you've been striving for.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think kind of just from hearing everyone's really good points, I think one key thing that's really stuck out for me is the communication aspects of things. And I do think kind of goes back to what Anne said earlier regarding the fact that kind of when it comes to leadership, a lot of it takes a lot of practice, and it's not something that kind of just happens overnight. And I think this really does feed into the aspect of reflection, in the sense of thinking again, kind of what sort of change are you leading for? How are you going to do it? And how are you trying to achieve that? And I think it then ties into communication, because having those conversations with your colleagues, with your peers, having that kind of reflective conversations are really important towards making change. And I do think, from my own perspective as a student, kind of doing the work that I do, reflecting, speaking to people around me, kind of having those conversations and how exactly we can lead change and the ways to do it has been quite important. And so I do think communication really does underpin a lot of the work that we do, especially those of us who are leading for change.
Yeah.
And communication can come in many different ways, can't it? We can talk to people, but we can also observe their actions. And one of the things about being a practice, somebody in a position, if you like, of authority or leadership in a practice, just watch where people gravitate, watch what they do, as well as talking to them. Because there have been times when people have accepted a job and come to work for me to do one thing, and have actually ended up doing something completely different. And by watching their natural inclinations to do things, you can hopefully end up then having the conversation, say, I've noticed you spent more time on the front desk, and you're very people focused. Where would you like to take your career? What would you like to do? And actually end up trying to get the right fit of role and job for each individual, and not shoehorn people into prior expectations. And I think, and that can change over time. So we have to be fluid with our engagement with people, and make no assumptions about people and about life.
Yeah, no, it's very good. And Gareth, yes.
Yes, I was just going to touch on that point, Anna, about reviewing things, because that's the key part, that the skills that you might practice, the cheat sheets that you might have in your head about, I should say this when somebody says that, and those things that we learn. Actually, every individual that we work with, they're changing all the time as well. So the things that work to motivate, to inspire, they're not always going to work, perhaps, and it's got to be something that you continuously check in and go, I wonder if that landed well. They've said this, maybe I should try something different, and see if that's something I've, and share those learnings with the people. I think it's very important to be honest about when you've had those moments of self-reflection, and you sort of say to your team, I said this, but I'm not entirely sure that was quite the way that I intended it, or perhaps what I was intending to communicate didn't come across in the way that you heard it. So let's talk about our communication as a team, or let's think about what would we like to do differently if we could wave a magic wand, and just be willing to be flexible. Because if you're inflexible, then you can continue doing the same thing, and that might be the management theory of the day, but actually we work with people, and we've got to recognize that those people will need different things from us at different stages in their life, just like we do when we are working with those other leaders that we're part of.
Yeah, great. I think that brings back to the inclusivity and diversity of views, and really listening as a leader. I think that's hopefully that answers your question, Jim, and I guess takes back that kind of encouragement, and you don't necessarily need a lot of resource to encourage people to lead in areas that they're passionate about. And equally, I think it feeds quite nicely into I don't think that should negate the responsibility of those that do have formal leadership roles and control of resources as well. And I think maybe leads into a question from Graham Dick on how would the panel differentiate good leadership from good management, and where would you include inspiration in a kind of our discussions about leadership? So I don't know does anyone want to volunteer to take that one first? Otherwise, I'm going to pick somebody.
Shall I jump in then?
Go first. Oh, you go first, Amanda. You got in there just before I might pick.
Oh, I can't stand a silence. Something that might be useful to everybody is we've just launched a course on this very topic, on the differences between leadership and management, because it's a question that comes up in everybody's mind at various points. So that's free to access on the Academy. So advert for that over, but do go and check it out for anybody who might be interested. But I think the piece around good management versus good leadership, actually there are a lot of very similar qualities. I imagine that the rest of our panel have got some more clinically specific ideas around this. But I think if you're looking at anything that you do to sort of question, am I doing this in the right way? Then that to me is a good sign that actually, whether you're leading or managing, if you're undergoing that sort of self-reflective process, actually you're looking to do the right thing, and you will be demonstrating that to the people that you work with. But I'll let Sheldon jump in next.
Yeah, I mean, leadership and management is, I think most people do both, and they're not easy to separate. And I'm not sure you'd want to separate them either, particularly. I suppose leadership is in terms of a business, working on the business. Management is working in the business, is what was always taught to me. And I suppose leadership, you can step back for a while and the business still continues, whereas management, you can't step back for very long without the business crumbling to some extent. The inspiration thing is an interesting point, because absolutely you need inspiration as a leader, but you need inspiration as a manager as well, and you need inspiration to do both well. And I suspect if you didn't have inspiration for either role, it would be very dull for all concerned. So I would like to think that inspiration is, I mean, it's a very nebulous term, but it's necessary for both roles, and possibly vice versa.
Yeah, yes, it's a good point that they're so intertwined often, and it's almost impossible to separate entirely, albeit there's different skills involved. Ryan, Emmanuel, Anna, do you have any further comments or thoughts? We've got a few questions come in, but interested to hear your perspectives on the inspiration question, and that any other additional thoughts on that leadership versus management conundrum.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that leadership is a self-actualization process, and it's about inspiration as much as anything else, whereas I would suggest management there's a degree of authority with it. And I think you do need to be a good leader to be a good manager, but you can still show really good leadership without the delegated authority of management. So, I think leadership is a really important thing that we have in spades in the profession, especially amongst our nursing teams and the reception teams. I think we have some amazing leaders in them, and they don't necessarily have a lot of management training or authority, but without them, certainly I know my day would generally be a lot more difficult.
Yeah, good point. Emmanuel, Anna, anything else on this topic?
I think they've covered things pretty well there. It's very hard to separate them out, and I think we all do a bit of everything.
Yeah, definitely. I do think, very hard to separate the two. And I guess when it comes to inspiration, I do think it kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier regarding the change you're trying to make and kind of what you're leading towards, kind of remembering what's motivating you for that. And so I guess for me, it was knowing the impact that I could have on the younger generation. And for me, that just kind of inherently motivated me to continue to lead for change, whether it was with or without a title. So yeah, I think inspiration is really important in leadership, I would say, definitely.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've got a fair few comments coming in. I'm trying to keep up with them, and I think this is from an anonymous one, but it's I guess wanting to just challenge back slightly on the leadership means different things to different people, and that considering where the veterinary sector is right now, and particularly the challenges with recruitment and retention, maybe we need to be reframing leadership, and particularly formal leadership roles are those that demonstrate leadership skills that will drive recruitment and retention within the profession, and try and keep it a little bit simpler, so that I guess questioning to focus on maybe some of the most challenging areas within the profession. The individual who put it in said they're happy to be challenged back, but interested to hear thoughts. Maybe Angara, I'd let you go first there, because I think you were very much saying, leadership can mean a lot of different things to different people, and I think it does, but just that challenge back of almost like contextualized leadership, I guess, for the challenges at hand.
Yeah, absolutely, and always happy to be challenged, because I think that's how we move things forward, and how we can learn from each other. So yes, please always do. I can fully understand the need to have one pivotal point. I guess the question that I would come back to is, if somebody is leading, especially in a formal position, do the people around them recognise that there is good leadership there? Because ultimately, does it matter which specific model they're following if they have got people that feel as though they are valued, they are recognised, and that ultimately things are moving forward, improving, that people are happy and have a good sense of well-being and self-worth when they're within that organisation? Because actually that's the piece that really matters, and that if as a leader you are able to engender those feelings within your team, within your organisation, then that's perhaps the more important point. So do we need to specify what leadership is? I would hope that all of us within our life experience, whether we are in vet school currently training to be a nurse, or whether we are leading a good organisation, can recognise that, because it's about how it makes you feel and how it motivates you. But it's an interesting topic as to whether do we need a formal definition within veterinary, and who and how could we create that, because that could be a very long discussion in itself.
Yeah, so we only have 7 minutes left, so we probably shouldn't get into
no not for right now.
So, but any other comments or thoughts on that? I guess maybe some of it as well is about the leadership can mean lots of different things, but it's partly about identifying where you need to be focused as a leader at any one time as well. But does any other comments from the other panelists on that?
This is an area where possibly management and leadership are being either confused or intertwined, certainly. And I think very rigid leadership or management structures actually may be discouraging people from progressing within the profession, because it doesn't suit their lifestyle, or because they don't feel they have the skills. And so I do think that we need to be thinking about alternatives to this, alternative structures, for example, as I already mentioned, but also alternative ways of fixing the same problem, rather than snapping back to an automatic, rigid, hierarchical structure that we've always had.
And it also then limits people's creativity in the role. We're all different, and we've all got different personalities. And some of the advantage of doing, the assessments, whether it's Myers-Briggs or any of the others, actually help you understand how to communicate better with the people surrounding you. And that's going to be dynamic and change as people come and go. And we change and evolve as we go forward. So I don't think there can be some standardized leadership processes, in that there's some expectations of what you'll deliver. But I think everybody is so different that you cannot expect the same. You can expect the same outcomes, but the processes by which they get there will be very individualized to that person and that unique combination of their personality and how they interact with the teams that they are leading. And I think we have to be confident in allowing people to do that and do things in the way which they feel they can best engage with their team and lead that team to that end goal. And I think sometimes we have to take a step back to take a step forward, and actually sometimes a hands-off approach, people might then make some mistakes, as Ryan alluded to earlier, but allowing people that opportunity to experience and grow in their leadership role. I think if we're too prescriptive, yes, I agree. I think you could find people being put off from wanting to do it because they can't see how the way that they function, communicate and behave can actually slot into that prescribed mode
Model. Yeah.
or model.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point, Anna. Well made. I think that just picking up there is a question come in from Katie Miller, who I think is one of our younger colleagues on the call, that flicks up, I guess, on Sheldon's comment about that kind of fitting back into that very rigid hierarchical structure that maybe did exist and does exist in some places. So how do you suggest bringing on board managers who are anchored in the past or an old school way of thinking where they don't really see the benefit of servant leadership, or bringing up new leaders continually who would rather copy and manage in that more traditional sense? So I guess it's kind of how do we foster that change from, I think we can all recognise hierarchical structures were very prevalent in the industry and the sector at some point, and they probably still are in some sites. How do we foster that change as leaders ourselves? Hopefully that captured your question, Katie.
I think, I mean, it's an incredibly good question. This is what I was referring to with the legacy drag, that we do have this legacy, and change won't happen overnight. It's going to take a while. And I am a great believer in the power of attraction. So a colleague of mine says we just need to make better cake. Because if you're making better cake than the cake that's being made over there, people will come for the better cake. So it's about demonstrating that this can work. Look, this is we're doing it well, people are happy. This is an alternative way where people can actually come, they can be themselves at work, they can take these opportunities, and hopefully, if enough practices are making better cake, as it were, then the change will come, because it will make economic sense because you're getting better outputs, but also it'll make better sense because it's a nicer way of working, and it's a nicer way of retaining people within the business. So I think I suppose that's carrot more than stick as an approach.
Yes, good point, Sheldon. Other comments on that? Anna, I can see you're about to speak there.
Well, I suppose I just feel that we have to have confidence in ourselves, and we have to have confidence in our team members. And I think there is a certain level of safety in following set procedures or a set style. And I think we just need to be brave. It's part of that courageous conversations sort of ideas, is that we have to say, we've got to look at things differently, and we've got to take the risk that change, because the profession is demanding that now. People want more flexibility of working. We absolutely must be more diverse and inclusive. We have to be brave enough to take the steps that go down that, despite that. We have to feel the discomfort, or nothing will change. We have to be prepared to take those steps. And that's another form of leadership in doing that. But it can leave people feeling very rocky and unsafe in the process. And they need to, if people are going to do that, they need to then be supported themselves. And that's where coaches or their senior leadership team that they report to, or whoever, can then provide them with that support too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how we've come back round to organisational culture, really, and how intrinsic leadership and organisational culture are, which is good that we've got a debate on that next month. But, I do think a lot of what the conclusions we're drawing all come round to how organisational culture impacts leadership, and leadership impacts organisational culture. So it'd be interesting to hear what we get from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gareth, Emmanuel, any closing comments for you? I'm sort of mindful of time, and it's getting on in the evening now, so we're going to have to wrap up fairly soon. But any closing comments from you guys? Then I'll maybe just give a summary. I know there's some questions we haven't answered that I'll just try and summarise before we finish up. But before I do that, and Gareth, Emmanuel, particularly, anything from you guys on that last question, or more generally?
I think it sort of proves the point that leadership is so very personal, from the conversations that we've had, and we've all had good experiences of it. And there are probably moments in our careers that we're proud of, and those that we perhaps wish we'd done a bit differently, and we'd like to help other people learn from that as well. I think it's really inspiring to see that people want to learn and want to get that change to happen. There's lots of different approaches that we can all take. But I'm feeling quite positive that, you know, throughout all of the different people that we have, through all of the different careers, professions that are involved in animal health and welfare, that there is a huge capacity and a huge desire to move things forward. It's been a very a very tumultuous time over the last sort of 5 years with different business models, different challenges politically, economically, etc. And we are continuing to go through that. But now is the time to be brave and to think about how differently you'd like to do things. Trial that out, learn, share, and participate in this process. Don't just let it happen to you. Be part of something and make that difference. It might be small, but there's no problem with that. Every small step is part of the bigger journey that we're all on. Not to sound too cliched.
Not at all. And Emmanuel.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what Harry said is, I think, summarized it very, very well. And I do think small steps can definitely amount to a very big change. And I do think ultimately leadership is something that is very personal. And I do think that it even if somebody might not view themselves as a leader or may not think they have the qualities, I think it is taking those small steps and realizing those small steps can have quite a significant impact is kind of what will kind of help drive you forwards. And I think ultimately, by everyone coming together, having those conversations, and I think it's conversations like these that really do elicit for change within the profession as a whole. And I think continuing these conversations, having those discussions, are what's really going to make a difference in the long run, supporting one another, reflecting together, is what I do think.
Yeah, thanks, Emmanuel. Well, thank you to all of our panel. I think that's a great way to finish up. That it's so good we're actually talking about this. I reflect back, as Anna said earlier, that when I went through vet school in the 90s, nobody even thought about vets even needing to even think about being leaders. And so just having these conversations is so important. I know there's a few questions I haven't got to. There's a couple, I think, more specifically for the college, relating to whether, considering how important leadership is, it should be more formally built into CPD requirements, and a question around, how in the NHS recruitment and retention and leadership is very tied up with salary and so on, and that's something I think that maybe I'll feed back to the college. And also a couple of questions more about the organisational leadership and how do larger organisations make sure that their leaders, in terms of clinical directors and so on, have sufficient time to invest in this, which I guess is more of that kind of organisational leadership and management question. So I'm sorry to everybody we didn't get time to discuss all those, but there are more sessions coming up. The more specific ones for the college, they came through to me as DMs, but I'll make sure that the college receives those. And I just want to say thank you to all the panel. I think it's been a really, really insightful discussion, really great to have such a diversity of views being expressed. And I think some commonalities in terms of the importance of us all being leaders and having that freedom to do that. And those of us in more formal leadership roles, making sure people have the space to do that, and that we always need to practice. It's like everything else. We get it wrong, we muck it up, and we need to carry on thinking about it. So on that note, I'll hand back to Deb, but thank you all for being here this evening. I hope it's been useful. I know I've really, really, really enjoyed listening, and thank you very much to our panelists.
Thank you.
A round of applause.
Thanks,
Deb,
Amanda.
over to you.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks to the panel for tonight's session. We've now come to the end of this session, so we will follow up with a summary of the session, and a copy of the recording will be made available on our website, and you will be notified as to where it is. We'll be sending out a short survey. The link is actually in the chat, but I'll also put it in the email afterwards. And we also have 6 sessions left in this session, so that will also feature in the email too. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.